Hello there, and welcome to our session, Securing Your Applications with Automated Security Patches in OCI. My name is Doug Clarke. I've been with Oracle for a number of years, working in the Java tool space, and most recently I've joined Oracle Labs, where we are converting some of our intelligence research into OCI products, services, and integrations. Okay, so today what I'd like to do is introduce you to a new service we've put out into OCI in the spring called Application Dependency Management. And what Application Dependency Management, or ADM, tries to do for you is address many of the challenges developers are facing today. Looking at the 2021 State of the Software Supply Chain report, I've extracted a couple of quotes here that I found interesting. The number of open source components or projects being consumed continues to grow year over year, but matched with that and exceeding it is the number of cyber attacks or vulnerabilities being found in these tools. Within this report, they did an analysis of 100,000 applications, and they found that 75% of them were not upgrading their components within the last year. And that means they're using older and older components with a growing set of vulnerabilities. Keeping up to date with these vulnerabilities and getting to a more recent version, or a version that isn't affected, is really critical. But a lot of companies struggle to keep up the pace. The last piece there was a sample they had calculated, looking at a fictional medium-sized company with 20 teams. And they estimated that some level of automation for detecting and remediating these vulnerabilities would save them up to 160 developer days per year. And in their estimation, that could equate to quite a large sum of money saved, as well as developer time being saved to work on other challenges. So what we have done is, within OCI, we have a number of components that come to bear in this space of helping you protect your software from vulnerabilities. If you look at the full DevOps lifecycle, from planning and developing a new release to deploying and operating it, we start at the source code, where we want to scan and give developers immediate feedback on vulnerabilities as early in their cycle as possible, so they can pick the right versions to use. We want to integrate into our build system, where we scan during the build and ensure that any vulnerabilities that exceed your thresholds would gate that build and prevent it from proceeding. Usually, most applications now are building some kind of container-based solution. So those images that are generated and published to a container repository can also be scanned. On the operation and monitoring side, we have operating system management and Java management services looking to help you keep up to date with the latest OS and JVM in your running applications. And then monitoring, making sure that your host is not vulnerable through exposed ports or any other OS level or network level configuration. So we have all of these pieces in play today to help you manage your system. What I would like to focus on in this talk is really this new service. And we really focus on the left side of it, more on the development end, and helping you identify and remediate vulnerabilities as early as you can in the cycle. So in the spring of 2022, we released this first service, the Application Dependency Management Service, from my team. I'll refer to it as ADM in some places in this slide deck. And this is our Oracle Labs team converting some of our research on vulnerability detection into actual services in OCI. There's a couple of key components that we will walk through, and some screen share snapshots that I've taken to show you what it would look like. And again, this service is live today. So the first piece we had to solve was capturing the vulnerabilities. So we have a concept or a resource in OCI called a knowledge base. And what we do is we ingest or consume open source data from mostly NVD and a couple of other public sites, where we can consume that data into our knowledge base. And then we can automate mapping that data from the information that is published to the actual Maven artifacts. Now, that process needs to be done because not all NVD data gives us the specific information about which artifacts from Maven Central are exposed to which vulnerabilities. So some transformation has to happen there. So in addition to a semi-automated process of mapping those out, we also walk through a manual curation process where we use Oracle experts to map what the vulnerabilities are to the Java artifacts. I should call out at this point that we are focused on Maven artifacts coming from Maven Central and Java as the main programming language, using pom.xml as your package manager. That is what we are initially supporting, but far from where we plan to end. One of the benefits of us ingesting and having this knowledge base inside OCI is then we can replicate it across all of the regions of OCI and all of the realms. So even our customers in government and dedicated regions have full access to the same knowledge base. Now, once we have this knowledge base and we ingest this data on a regular pace every couple of hours and curate it as fast as we can, we then give you the capability of generating what we call a vulnerability audit. Now, a vulnerability audit is basically a report of the vulnerabilities your application is exposed to. So on the client side, you would calculate all the dependencies that your application has, send that over to the ADM service, and it will give you back this vulnerability audit with a list of all the vulnerabilities that your application is currently exposed to, and all the scores, the criticality of those vulnerabilities are then reflected to you. So now if we switch gears a bit and take a look at what we actually show you in OCI. So if you go into the Oracle Cloud Console, you can look for our knowledge base. It's within the Application Dependency Management Service. You can create a knowledge base, and you can create these per project, per team, whatever the right granularity is for your organization. And here we take a look at a specific knowledge base, and it just has a name, some tags. I can put it in a compartment, same as any other resource in OCI. And then I get a summary of all the vulnerability audits. So these vulnerability audits are basically just a list here. They each have a name, when they were created. But over on the right, you see the number of vulnerabilities found and the maximum CVSS score, common vulnerability score, that this particular vulnerability was registered with. So the higher the number, the more critical it is. There's a V2 and a V3 coming out of the NVD system, and we are trying to make both available to you. So then if I pick on one of these vulnerability audits, I can go in, I can see when it was created, its status. This particular one failed. And the reason it failed is because it found vulnerabilities in my dependencies that I need to remediate. Now, you'll see lots of talks on the log4j, and of course, I picked the same one. You'll see that version 2.14.0 is exposed to a number of vulnerabilities, and its transitive dependency, the log4j API, also has that similar vulnerability. So in my application dependencies expressed in my pom.xml file, I have referenced this log4j core. So up top, I see I have one vulnerable artifact in my configuration that I need to fix, and its score is a score of 10. So that is highly critical. It's very important that I go and fix this. These dependency graphs can be very deep. This is a very simple example I've provided here, but you can then filter it by the V2 or V3 score. You can choose to see all the artifacts in the tree or just the ones that are here. And it is a tree view. You can collapse up and see the branches as you need to. So you can navigate through the whole tree of dependencies and figure out what you need to fix. So, at this point here, we have a knowledge base and we have a vulnerability audit. These are first-class resources in OCI. It's a free-to-use service. You can go out and you can access it through the SDK or the CLI to create these vulnerability audits. And then you can get the results either through the CLI, the SDK, or in the console, as I've shown you. In parallel with making this core functionality available for scanning your dependency graph, we've also built an integration with the OCI DevOps service. And here is what OCI looks like in its DevOps service as a whole. It has code repositories, build pipelines, deployment pipelines, artifact repos, and then the deployers, the deploy pipelines can push your artifacts out to various host environments, however you need them deployed. But what we're going to focus on here, again, we're focused on the kind of the shift left and getting that vulnerability detection done as early as possible. We're going to look at DevOps build pipeline. So here if we kind of drill down into the build pipeline, over on the right, you see this is their standard flow. You tell them where the source code is, they check it out. That can be from a source code repository in OCI or an external one. And then they go through what we call a build stage. And in there's a set of steps that happen. In this particular example, I'm going to check out the code, then I'm going to set up my build environment to do the build. But now, before actually building, what I'm going to do is introduce this new step called a vulnerability audit. And that's going to calculate my dependencies, ship them over to the ADM service in the knowledge base I've created and granted access to. And then it's going to ship me back the vulnerabilities that those dependencies are exposed to. And what this allows me to do is gate my build. So if it finds vulnerabilities that exceed my thresholds, and I'll show you what the thresholds look like in a minute, it will then fail the build at this point. If everything goes well and there's no problems with my vulnerabilities and my dependencies, it will continue through the rest of the build stage and whatever other phases I've set up in the deployment or DevOps pipelines. From a user point of view, integrating this is pretty simple. You still have to go to the ADM service, create a knowledge base. Then we give you the policies. So you have to grant your DevOps project access to talk to that KB. And once that's done, you just need to configure these vulnerability audit steps in your build pipeline. So the build spec in DevOps is a YAML file, and we've added a new step type called vulnerability audit. So in the configuration section in here, right now we support Maven. We have to tell the system where the pom.xml is in the source tree. And then I have 3 different thresholds I can configure to help limit or control what vulnerabilities will cause my build to fail. I can list a set of packages that I don't care about. Maybe in this example here, the Apache struts has too many vulnerabilities and I know I'm not exposed to them, so I don't want to fail at this point. So I can add that to my list. But then I look at the V2 and the V3 scores from NVD, and I can basically set a threshold. So what this one says is any vulnerability with a V2 score of 6 or less, or a V3 score of 8.1 or less, I am okay. Those are permissible, and the build should continue. If they exceed that, then the build would fail. And then the last 3 configurations are kind of the coordinates for the ADM elements. What is the identifier, the OCID for the knowledge base I created? And I can get that from the console and lets me copy it. I just need to paste it in here. And then I have to pick which compartment in my OCI tenancy I want to create the vulnerability audit in. And again, from my compartments list, I can get that OCID and paste it in here. And then I can put an audit name so that in that table view of all my audits, I can see how this particular one will be identified. So this is all I have to do. And all the machinery behind the scenes to calculate the dependencies, ship them across, is all done for you. In the DevOps build pipeline, you will see that it has a configuration page like this. The first tab is the build pipeline itself, but then from there I can launch a build run. And this is a sample I did. And you can see in the middle panel there, it gets a worker, checks out my code, reads the build spec, and then starts processing through the various steps. And the new step that I've added is this vulnerability audit. In this case here, I can see everything succeeded, and I'm very happy. I grabbed 2 other screenshots to show you what it would look like for a pass and a fail. There is a new vulnerability audit tab in the run details. So in the top left, you can see that this particular one passed. So my report is successful. And then in the bottom right, I can see what it would look like if it failed. So you get an error message that it failed the vulnerability audit step. In the logs, I can see that there is a problem. In the vulnerability audit tab in the details, it'll say it failed, and it'll give me a link back to the ADM service so I can look at that vulnerability audit and see which vulnerabilities that may have appeared since my last build have led to this problem. Okay, so we've introduced the ADM service, and we've talked a bit about how the DevOps integration works. The other piece I just wanted to kind of connect the dots here is a little bit about Oracle Labs. The Labs team does a lot of research for many different product areas across Oracle and has led to many of the innovations in the Oracle product suite. The labs.oracle.com is a public site where you can learn about some of our research, some of the papers we publish, and anything else that may interest you. But much of what you see in the ADM service came out of a team called the Osint research team, open source intelligence. So some of the projects they've been working on is analyzing vulnerabilities from public sources, figuring out how to best ingest that into a system, how to do a vulnerability detection, as I've shown you, and also investigating how we can soon deal with remediation, which refers to fixing the vulnerabilities. So we could not only tell you about them, but also propose the version you should upgrade to, and maybe even give you a pull request to apply that change. We're also doing research in supply chain protection, SALSA, and looking at trying to fine-tune vulnerability detection down to the class and method, not just at the package level. So we can not only tell you that you're vulnerable because you picked up a given package, but look at your code or your configuration and tell you if you're specifically vulnerable to that, or maybe your code doesn't use the vulnerable pieces that are exposed. So we can help you do some analysis and make a more intelligent decision when you need to upgrade and what version you want to upgrade to. Okay, so that brings us to the end. To review what I've gone over, we have introduced the App Dependency Management Service, ADM. It became publicly available in May. It is free to use. We can analyze and give you vulnerability audits for all your Java dependencies based on NVD and our own knowledge-based curation. You can use ADM through the console, but we also have full support in the CLI and SDK. If you're using DevOps build, we can integrate right there with the vulnerability audit step, and then you can gate your builds so your developers know immediately when a new vulnerability has come up that they should fix before they proceed. which is a great way to kind of avoid having to deal with things near the end of the dev cycle. If you're looking for more information, we have our documentation is fully published in there. Just go to the docs on the Oracle Cloud and search for application dependency management. It's much easier to give you this than to try to give you the link, but take a look at that. In there, if you have any support requests, you can submit them through the OCI console integration. A couple of things I did want to highlight. At the start of this talk, I talked about the different parts of the DevOps cycle. So there's 3 other sessions I would like to call out that you might want to take a look at. The DevOps team is presenting one on secure software delivery end-to-end. And then in our security services team and vulnerability scanning team, they have 2 security-related talks that talk to some of those other scanning pieces that leverage the same NVD data to perform the analysis and tell you when there's vulnerable, and then some best practices on how to integrate that into your development. I'd like to thank you for your time today. My name is here, and if you have any questions, I'm always happy to help out. I hope you found this helpful, and good luck securing your application development, and hopefully OCI can provide you all the capabilities in this space that you need.